have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Fighting outside speed off.
Bring in SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where you are looking live at a Falcon 9 rocket on Slick 40, preparing to launch 53 Starlink satellites for SpaceX's space-based internet constellation. I am Chris Gebhardt, the Assistant Managing Editor for NASASpaceflight, and thank you all for joining us. We have a team here waiting to take you through the final 40 minutes of this countdown and liftoff of the next Starlink mission. Joining me on comms today is Hagen Warren. Hagen, how's it going this morning?
Going good. Excited to spend my Friday evening, well, rather my Saturday morning, watching a rocket launch.
Indeed. And behind the scenes, we have Michael Baylor pushing the buttons and pulling all of the levers for us here. Thank you, Michael, for all of the work that you do for us. And also joining the team out there in the field this morning is Stephen Marr, who's not on comms, but is out there taking photos and providing some other angles for us here. And also on the causeway, we have the one and only Thomas Burghardt. Thomas, how is it going this now morning, technically?
Yeah, we've had a bit of a delay to the festivities this evening, but nonetheless ready for a rocket launch now Saturday early morning here in the eastern US. The weather has cooperated a little bit. Some lightning is off in the distance. You might even see it show up in the background of our camera view, but it's way out over the ocean. The lightning is no longer in the area where we'd have an issue with it for today's launch. Even some clouds have cleared. We've got some nice moonlight shining down on the press site today, and looking forward to another 9 launch from the Space Coast.
Indeed. And as always, thank you all for showing up and participating with us here today. We love bringing this stuff to you. And come and join us as well. So thank you very much. If you have any questions for us as we head down toward our liftoff, just about just under 39 minutes from now, go ahead and tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat, and that'll help us see it, and we will put it in our queue. So yeah, let's get some things right off the bat here. We've got Moldy Space Industries saying, at least unless we forget the Thomas fan club, which is in relation to a previous message from Moldy Space Industries saying hashtag Hagen fan club. So Hagen, you have your own fan club now as well.
Finally, I've been waiting for this day. Uh,
And Thomas, I think we will begin with a very valid question.
Yeah.
Something for towers. Go.
Oh gosh, we're setting new records for how quickly we get to this question. Yes, this is the original pad from the meme. Space Launch Complex 40 has got 4 lightning protection towers surrounding the Falcon 9, which, of course, may have been even useful during today's festivities, given the weather moving through the area, but shouldn't be needed anymore tonight. The weather is now cooperating for launch.
Yeah, and Thomas, I asked you that question about the lightning protection towers, not just because of the storms that came overhead, but also there have been quite a few warnings in the area with severe weather. How are things in general looking for you down there right now?
You know, right now we've got a little bit of wind, but otherwise the temperature is beautiful. The skies are clearing. It's a beautiful night, to be honest. A great day to go to space. Hopefully the clouds don't get too much in the way of our launch viewing, although sometimes this amount of clouds can actually be perfect to give you some more interesting visuals than even a clear night would. So hopefully it'll be all right. But anyway, yeah, the weather seems to have cleared out of the way, and despite delaying our launch a little bit today, should be a wonderful liftoff.
Indeed, and indeed, and this liftoff is a little bit different. Hagen, I'm going to throw this one to you. We've been seeing a lot of these missions go south, but this one is actually going to go northeast for this time. And I'm throwing this to you because you're in the area. How's the weather up there?
You know, unfortunately, I was outside a few minutes ago before I hopped on stream, and it looked like some clouds were in the way towards the southeast where we can typically see the entry burn. Hoping they'll clear out. I'll go take a look right before entry burn starts just to see if I can see that faint orange glow off in the distance. But up here in North Carolina right now, it's not looking too good for weather.
And Hagen, you set me up perfect there because right now it looks like the actual booster recovery weather out in the Atlantic is good to support tonight's liftoff. But if you are inland, this is one that's going up the northeast, this is one that is going northeast up the coast of the United States. So if you are in the Carolinas, Virginia, the Boston and New York areas, if it is clear, you might have a chance to see this ascending into orbit tonight. And if you are on the Carolina, Georgia, and Northeast Florida coast, you will probably also be able, if the weather is good enough, be able to see the entry and maybe the landing burn if you're lucky, but most likely the entry burn coming up here. But Thomas, that actually brings us to a question that Joshua was asking, which was why exactly is this going northeast? A lot have been going southeast from the Cape recently.
Absolutely. This is actually the return to the more normal mission, believe it or not. The recent missions, like you said, have been flying southeast from Cape Canaveral towards this 53-degree inclination. That is the tilt of the orbit relative to the equator, and the current shell of satellites that SpaceX is currently deploying are all in that 53-degree inclined orbits, which can be reached in two different directions because Cape Canaveral is less than 53 degrees inclination. For example, if you were at a launch site that was 53 degrees north of the equator, you would have to basically fly directly east and you would result in that orbit. But since you're between the equator and the 53-degree longitude, you can either fly northeast or you can fly south, and both of them will result in a 53-degree inclination orbit. Here's the problem, though. If you fly southeast from Cape Canaveral and in a straight line towards 53 degrees, you will overfly the Bahamas, which is a no-good thing. You want to avoid overflying populated areas as much as you can. So to fly southeast from here, the rocket has had to have been doing some slight dogleg maneuvers, basically a slight turn during the ascent profile to avoid overflying the Bahamas. And so, but if you fly northeast, no such object exists. You've got the open ocean and no overflight risks in that direction. So originally, these Starlink missions have been flying northeast. The reason that they recently started going southeast was because of recovery weather. All of these missions utilize drone ship recoveries because you're really maxing out the reusable performance of the Falcon and rocket for these Starlink missions. So you need a drone ship out there for first stage recovery. And the sea state in the northern Atlantic in winter is not super conducive to rocket recovery. Can you SpaceX has done it many times, but when you're flying every week and you don't want to be delaying missions, not just Starlink missions, but also the knock-on effects to customer missions, because you have been putting off missions because the recovery weather has made you wait a day or two here and there, it makes more sense to actually take the slight performance hit, even reduce the number of satellites on board so the rocket has the performance to turn around the Bahamas, because you'll have better recovery weather and you'll suffer less recovery weather related delays. However, it is now coming up the latter half of March, and the recovery weather in the North Atlantic has started to improve a bit, and so SpaceX has transitioned back to the slightly more efficient northeast trajectory, no dogleg required, which is why we're back up to 53 satellites on board today's mission. So that is the story behind today's trajectory, headed northeast from Cape Canaveral.
That is awesome. And Andrew, thanks so much for the support. And we answered that question of what are the four towers there as well. Max B saying, oh, a new person to say hello to. Hi, Hagen. Thank you very much. Rough Riders, can't forget about the Christy fan club. Thank you. And indeed, Go Booster 1051. And I chose this one not because my name's in it, but because it's Go Booster 1051. And Thomas, we've got a bit of a milestone here this morning, don't we?
We absolutely do. Booster 1051, which is the first stage supporting today's flight, the lower 70% or so of today's rocket, is flying for the 12th time. This will be the 12th trip to space and back for this Falcon 9 first stage. The first ever Falcon 9 booster to reach this number of flights. It will be the first of many, of course, but it is going to be the new fleet leader as far as the number of flights under its belt after what we hope to be another successful launch and landing today. It is being recovered on Just Read the Instructions, so all goes well. This booster will fly more than 12 times, but today is the 12th flight and the first time that has been reached. Also, just a quick note about this particular booster. Many of its missions have been Starlink missions. As one of the older Block 5 boosters, it reached the higher number of flights quickly, which is, matches with the fact that it's the first one to reach Flight 12 today. And SpaceX has been using these fleet leader boosters on Starlink missions more than customer missions because, again, there's a little bit of associated risk. Not that SpaceX doesn't go through tremendous amounts of work to make sure they are operating just as reliably as the rest of the fleet, but there's always a little bit of unknown as they are pushing the boundaries of reuse on these kinds of flights. So this particular booster flew a lot of Starlink missions leading up to today. Its very first mission, however, was the Crew Dragon Demo 1 mission, the uncrewed test flight of Crew Dragon, which is a personal note to me because that was the first launch I covered in person for NASASpaceflight. So I have a personal connection to this booster, and I'm glad to see it flying again.
There you go. Indeed, indeed. And there's a related question to this for this particular booster here, Thomas. Asking why was this booster sent to California for one launch and then brought back to the Cape? Is that cost efficient?
Yeah, so it all depends on the upcoming launch manifest and what the needs at any one time are. The fact is, you might have X number of boosters sitting around in Florida, and you have X number of missions, whether they're Starlink missions or customer missions. And if you determine simply that your fleet over here in Florida is sufficient to support your near-term manifest, it makes more sense to ship a booster from here over to the West Coast and support a mission rather than wait for, say, a new booster to come out of the manufacturing line in Hawthorne and go to Vandenberg. So it's kind of a very case by case basis. You'll see boosters cross coasts multiple times. You'll see different boosters flying from different pads, and it really there's no formula for that. It really is a case by case basis based on where they are in the manifest and what customers are ready to fly, in addition to their own internal Starlink missions.
Gotcha. And talking and continuing to talk about the sort of booster and the milestone that we're reaching today as we see the vapors starting to form down at the base of the
Oh,
Falcon 9, indicating that fueling is indeed underway. Of course, fueling has been underway since the T minus 35-minute mark when RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen began flowing into stage 1 and RP1 kerosene began flowing into stage 2. That all sort of times to the load and go method of fueling that SpaceX uses, and that results in the fueling wrapping up just 2.5 minutes prior to the scheduled liftoff time for Falcon 9. So, yes, you can see Falcon 9 starting to get frosty. Lots of rockets have started to get frosty
yeah.
here because we've also seen SpaceX testing their Starship out at Starbase, putting it through cryo tests. So that is very good. Craig asking, "Do you guys ever sleep?" Nah, we never sleep. Never.
Yes, yeah.
There's too many cool things happening.
It's been a busy couple days around here, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has in.
There is a certain other rocket that I can see off to the left here that's very brightly lit up here on the Space Coast that we've been paying attention to the last couple days. But Falcon 9 gets its night here, so we're going to pay attention to that tonight.
Yeah, Falcon 9 does get its night. It really does tonight. Okay, so another question here from Camper. He's saying, or they're saying, bit confused here. How come this instantaneous launch was able to move by 70 minutes?
An excellent question. It is still an instantaneous launch window by certain definitions. I guess here's the deal. SpaceX, the Starlink satellite internet constellation, consists of thousands and thousands of satellites that are all in different shells or different planes. Different shells which consist of many, many different planes, which is basically imagine an orbit around the Earth, and there are actually multiple satellites following pretty much that exact same orbit. It's just each satellite is at a different point in the orbit at any given time. that gives you your expanded coverage over the entire globe when you have all the different planes filled with all the different satellites. And the way you determine your Starlink launch time is when one of those planes crosses over the launch site. Effectively, there's a little bit of give in there because the rocket takes some time to reach the orbit, but more or less, when the plane crosses over the launch site, that's when the rocket lifts off. And so they are targeting the planes that obviously need more satellites or have not gotten their share of Starlink satellites yet. And so that determines their launch opportunities. However, since they are still pretty relative into filling the constellation, there are a couple times where there are two planes that are both empty right next to one another, which means that if you reserve the range for a little bit over an hour, it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours, that means that window that you have reserved on the range actually includes two instantaneous launch windows, one for one orbital plane and one for another one. And so tonight, what happened when the weather was not cooperating at the beginning of their reserved launch window, and you can actually see if you go into the mission execution forecasts, which are delivered by the Patrick Space Force Space Launch Delta 45, the times given on those forecasts are actually the window that SpaceX has basically reserved on the range. That's their real launch window. But in reality, there's only 2 times during that slot that they can actually lift off and deliver payloads to a useful orbit for the Starlink constellation purposes. So they were going to originally target the first opportunity tonight. Weather was not cooperating at that time, so we said, all right, we'll just go to the second opportunity. The weather's improving. And sure enough, weather did improve over that time. And so they're just going to simply put these satellites into a different shell of the constellation. It really makes no difference one way or the other. Now, a little bit farther down the line, what's going to happen is you'll no longer have two planes that are empty right next to one another. And so eventually SpaceX is just going to have to say, all right, we only have the one launch opportunity tonight or today or whatever. So if weather or anything is being uncooperative, we'll just have to wait 24 hours and launch again the next day. So for now, they have this luxury of being able to give themselves basically two launch opportunities, even though they're both instantaneous on their own. That will eventually go away as the constellation becomes more full.
Gotcha. And Hagen, I'm going to throw you this next question coming to us from Apogee MC, who says, will we see SLS get lit up by Falcon 9's fire, or do you think it will barely be noticeable with the already cool looking, I'm going to go with LC 39B on this one, although 49B is some wishful future thinking for the Starship class at Kennedy. But yeah, Hagen, what sort of lighting effect might the Falcon 9 have on SLS tonight?
Yeah, so obviously a very large moon rocket is on the pad, a few pads down at Launch Complex 39B. And definitely, if you've never been to a launch down in Florida, these launches light up the entire Florida sky. And even still, with the floodlights on SLS and on the tower on 39B, it will still light up the rocket a bit. Now, it definitely won't light it up as much as if there weren't any floodlights, but you'll definitely be able to see a bit of brightening on SLS and on the mobile launcher.
Indeed. And it's worth noting here that with SLS on pad B, that means 37B down at the Cape, 40 which we're seeing tonight with the Falcon 9, 41 where Atlas launches, 39A where the Falcons and Falcon Heavies launch, and now 39B along with pad 46 down at the Cape are all active again.
Oh.
And very nice to see two Kennedy Space Center launch pads active. But that is not the rocket that we're here for tonight. We are here for the Falcon 9, but we would be remiss if we didn't mention Artemis and SLS being out at the pad. But Hagen, another good question that's coming to us from Jay Gunpla, saying, I live in Eastern Tennessee. Would I be able to see any of this launch other than from the wonderful views and the awesome that the awesome camera folks give us?
Yeah, well, definitely, you most likely no. Eastern Tennessee is pretty far inland, um, especially with the Appalachians in the way. It'll be pretty hard to see the entry burn, which is most likely what you would be able to see um, from Eastern Tennessee.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And there's actually a question here that I would well, before we do that, Ryan, thanks so much and welcome to the Red Team membership level, as well as Daniel Jones. Thank you so much for becoming a PadRat member. We very much appreciate all of that. And I do see a couple of other questions here from Musical Wolves asking about any precautions that need to be taken with SLS nearby. Not for Falcon 9 on pad 40. The sort of radius that you would be worried about as a Falcon 9 would go uphill in the event that anything bad were to happen is not a concern for the SLS sitting on pad B.
Yeah,
in that regard.
SLS may affect ops on 39A, the other SpaceX pad,
Yes.
and we'll of course be talking about that for the next SpaceX mission. After today's flight, the next one on the manifest is the Axiom 1 mission, a private Crew Dragon mission to the ISS at the beginning of April. But though that will definitely be something to watch for between that launch preparations and SLS wet dress hops. But pad 40 is far enough south that no issues with SLS being out on the pad, other than some pretty cool visuals. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some imagery of other rockets getting on their pads and launching while SLS is also on the pad, because photos of multiple rockets in the one frame are always cool, and now we've got a new rocket to take those photos with. So
Indeed, and actually, there's a question here from Clever Girl exactly like that, Thomas, and maybe that's a good point to hit. Is the fact that SLS is on 39B, would that prevent Falcon 9 from launching from 39A?
So not quite. Two rockets can be on those pads at the same time. In fact, it's happened many times before. See the shuttle program. But there is the conflict that you have is you can't have basically hazardous operations happening at both of the pads at the same time. So you won't have two rockets fueled at 39A and 39B respectively at the same time. Also, I would get fired if I did not point out that the T-minus 20-minute event is happening right now. So I should make sure we address that. And SpaceX giving us a hint that the countdown is proceeding nominally with the perfectly normal and expected event from the transporter during the fueling operations for today's flight.
And
But talking
I'm
about, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm sure a lot of you are veterans of Falcon 9 flights, but for anyone who is new or anyone who is wondering exactly what that vent is and why it's a very important milestone for the Falcon 9, that is our indication that they have wrapped up the RP1 kerosene loading into the second
Yes.
stage and are purging the transporter erector lines and also venting some gaseous oxygen that has built up in the first stage tanks as well. But purging all of that, getting mainly the transporter erector, the gray structure that you see sort of blocking the view of the Falcon 9 except from the top of the fairing there, getting that ready to transition to liquid oxygen loading into the second stage. So it's a big visual milestone, but it's one, like Thomas said, that tells us that everything is on track and progressing to schedule.
And you can actually get a good tell because of the weather that has moved in here. You got a little bit of humidity in the air, which really dramatizes the vapors coming off the rocket. You got a lot of vapors around the rocket tonight. But anyway, back to the other part of fueling that we were talking about between 39A and 39B. Yeah, you can't have rockets fueled on both pads at the same time because those pads are too close together. The hazard zones for a fueled rocket intersect one another, basically. So you can either be doing the wet dress of SLS on 39B, or you can be fueling a Falcon 9 for launch on 39A, but you can't do both at the same time. So potential Axiom 1 SLS wet dress schedule coordination will have to go on there. And you'll just have to wait and see when exactly that will happen. The expectation would be that Axiom 1 would take priority over a wet rehearsal because it's an actual launch operation, a crewed flight too. But remains to be seen. Of course, the SLS schedule also just depends on all the preparations they have to do now that the rocket is out of the pad. Anyway, might end up being a non-issue, but we'll keep you updated on that as we get a little bit closer, of course.
Indeed. And just want to say really quick, GhostSynth and Kaja, thank you so much for the support. Very, very much appreciated. To everyone who supports us, thank you so much, whether it's super chats or, coming and hanging out on all of the streams and watching the ad, or if you're a membership, we've got a great membership program with good perks and thank you. Thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated by all of our team members here at NSF. So thank you. Username saying, genuinely mad that the rain clouds are obscuring my view from South Carolina. Thanks for always providing excellent and thoughtful coverage. And yeah, it is always a shame when the clouds block the view. It really is. We've all been there. All been there.
Although we do have some good news, the fact that they're flying northeast again today also indicates that they'll be doing so for the next few Starlink missions, so you'll have more opportunities to catch an entry burn in the coming months. So don't give up hope just yet, even if it doesn't work out tonight.
Indeed. And Fernando saying, nerdy love all from Mexico. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Um, and Mark, thank you for becoming a Padrat member. Thank you very much for that. So here is so here's a question for you, Thomas. It's coming from Space Wolf, and they're asking, if SpaceX decided that a booster could be expendable, how
Hmm.
many how many Starlinks could they launch?
Ooh. Oh gosh. S-
I
With
can
an
answer this from a
expendable Falcon
payload
9
fairing volume
right,
perspective.
yeah. So here's the thing. If you went expendable, you would almost certainly no longer be performance limited. You'd probably be volume limited by that point because it's almost volume limited right now. You could fit a couple more, most clearly demonstrated by the fact that they can take, two Starlink satellites off, which are really flat, and put 2 or 3 rideshare payloads that are bigger but not as heavy, or not as dense, I guess I should say, on top. Um, it is currently mass limited, and that's why we were talking about drone ship recoveries on Starlink missions. That is the maximum performance a Falcon 9 can do with acceptable margins for a drone ship landing. That's how they determine how many Starlink satellites go on any particular flight. If you went expendable, you would only get a couple more satellites on there before you run into thus running out of room in the fairing. The exact number, I don't think I actually know. It'd probably be under 70.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, indeed. And here's a good. I just love this comment from Illinois Captive. Thank you so much, Illinois Captive, saying, it would be cool if SpaceX was able to add to the booster a strip of all the mission logos that. Yeah. Sorry there, Illinois Captive was saying, it would be cool if SpaceX would be able to add to the booster a strip of all the mission logos the booster had launched, and then keep adding as it launches, kind of like sending a browser history every mission. I think that's a great comment. So thank you so much. We appreciate the laugh there. Um. So here's another good question for you, Thomas. And Hagen as well. What is the more historic moment? B-1051 reaching 12 launches and landings, or getting the first image from the James Webb Space Telescope?
Oh, that's okay. I know Hagen's answer, but I can tell Hagen that I agree with him because I don't think this is even close.
Yeah. So I'm obviously going to say the first image from James Webb because unlike B-1051, which has been launching since 2019, James Webb has been in development and is now in space. But James Webb, before launching, had been in development for almost 2 decades. It's been a long time coming, and just the science and the capabilities of James Webb is going to be enormous and make a massive impact on the astrophysics community. So definitely getting that first image from James Webb is going to be a pretty revolutionary moment for the astrophysics community and just astrophysics as a whole. Um, Whereas B-1051 landing for the 12th time is definitely a massive accomplishment. Um, but like I said, B-1051 hasn't been in development for over 20 years.
Yeah, and I would just add that in hindsight, give it a couple extra years and you won't even remember this milestone because there'll be another one. SpaceX reuse in general has a whole lot of significance because it is paving the way for some very important and hopefully very exciting missions of the future when you look at the Starship program and things like that. But the fact is that today's specific milestone is a very small step in the more broader context of what SpaceX's reuse is important about. And so, yeah, I'm going to lean very heavily towards first image from James Webb, which has on its own its massive amount of historical and scientific significance.
I have to agree on that. Not that a 12 reuse is anything to snub your nose at. In the reusable orbital class booster class category, but it James Webb for me too. Yes. Um, and here's a here's a question from Cerritus, who is asking, though not a great idea, would launching 2 Falcon 9s from 39A and Slick 40 at the same time be technically possible? Technically possible, yes. The range would never allow it, but technically possible, yes, and technically is in fact the best form of correct, as we all know. So,
And anyone at SpaceX, if you're watching, do it. I dare you.
indeed. Upon methane, thank you for the support, very much appreciated. And Thomas, here's a question from Rosen, who is asking, uh, they're asking where does SpaceX stand on progress? I think the question is more where does the Starlink constellation stand progress-wise? How many are up there now? And this
Ah,
this is a milestone mission for this as well, isn't it? It's a milestone mission all around for the Starlinks apparently tonight.
yeah. So this mission will bring the total number of Starlink satellites up to above 2,300 satellites, 2,300 birds up there for the Starlink constellation after today's mission successfully reaches orbit, which is another milestone on the way. However, in the broader context of things, Starlink in general is going to contain tens of thousands. The actual number isn't even finalized yet. They're still working on, what phase 2 is going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. Still even filling this particular shell, but which I think the shell gets 1,584, I think is the exact number in this shell. But anyway, the over 2,300 satellites total across all the different Starlink shells that have started deployment so far, but still a long way to go as well.
Indeed. And we're getting a lot of questions from people saying, like, do you have a view of Pad B? You know why we're asking. And yes, we very much do know why you're asking if there is a shot of Pad B that we can show you. The unfortunate answer to that is no, but it's not because Thomas can't see it. When we are present at these launches, the basic rule that we have to abide by is you can point the camera at the launch pad that the rocket you are there to cover is launching from. Now, if in that shot there is another one that just by happenstance is in the background, that is allowed, but Thomas is not able to pan the camera over to the Kennedy Space Center side to show you SLS today, because we are on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station side of the base. So I know
And
a
of
lot of
course,
people are asking, and it's a cool shot. I wish we could show it to you. Trust me, I wish we could show it to you. I very much wish they would put an active rocket on all of the active pads while SLS is out there, just so we can get that photo. But yeah.
yeah, and I'll just say that there is plenty of very cool shots of SLS from our coverage from yesterday of the rollout itself. And then this morning, we actually had another media opportunity to get a little up close with the rocket once it was at the pad. And there's some very cool footage there. Also, tons of photos from the NASA Spaceflight photography team. So if you need your fix of Orange Rocket good, please go check that out. There's plenty of things out there. And expect plenty of continuing coverage of that test campaign here on the channel as well. But today we are focusing on Falcon 9 here at Pad 40. I can visually describe
Yeah.
just really quick that the spotlights are on at 39B. It's very bright over there. And the rocket is definitely nice and prominent on the Cape Canaveral skyline for the next few weeks.
Indeed. And here is a good question. Hagen, I'm going to throw this one to you. B1051 being the flight leader, does that mean it has the darkest color soot? Hashtag go B1051.
This is a good question. So if we want to get technical, as Chris said, technically is the best answer. Um, yes, but there is not going to be much of a difference between it and other boosters who are up there in terms of flights. However, what also determines a booster, how clean a booster is in terms of soot, is also if the booster has been refurbished. So if there's certain areas on a booster that have been refurbished, they're likely cleaner. So that might have an effect. But if we want to get technical, if there was no refurbishment, then yes, B1051 would likely have the darkest soot.
There we go. And at 7 minutes to go till the anticipated liftoff of the Starlink 4-12 mission, just going to run really quick down just some facts for this mission. Falcon 9 Booster 1051, as we've been talking about, making its 12th flight, making it the fleet leader for the Falcon 9s. This mission is going northeast up the coast of the United States, and the booster will attempt to land on Just Read the Instructions. The orbit target for tonight is 304 by 317 kilometers in a 53.2-degree inclination orbit. And there are 53 Starlink version 1.5 satellites on board. And with 6.5 minutes to go, I want to point one other thing out. Amiga Clone says the 40th launch of either a Falcon 9 booster or a Starship would pass JWST in first images. And I love this because this person knows their history. Who here knows why 40 is the number to beat?
All right,
Because the
Hagen, no
shuttle-
pressure.
Because the shuttle Discovery did 39. And that's current world lead.
I could have known that.
Yes.
I
yeah, obviously
deeply
Chris would know
apologize
that.
to all the people named Chris that are now disappointed in me.
But yes, with just about 6 minutes to go, Thomas, a quick question for you. Do they use the same engines on the boosters each time?
Ooh, that is a good question. Sometimes. It
Yes.
does depend. Every once in a while, they will need to swap engines out. And of course, we don't really have firm data on this. It's not like SpaceX announces what engines are flying every single flight. For the most part, the understanding is that the engines kind of stick with the booster because, well, if you don't have to change them out, why would you? But if an engine, has to go some extra refurbishment work reason, or for any reason they want to swap some engines out for some newer ones and rotate them between the boosters, they can do that, and they have done that. So more or less, they try to keep them with the same booster just because it's easier. But every once in a while, they swap them out. We don't have any firm numbers about the engines on this particular flight or anything. That's just not something that gets announced. But for the most part, they stay on the same. Sometimes they get swapped out though.
And Joseph Foster is with a good question here. Is there a different price for a once flown versus a twice flown or more booster? This is a good question, but a slightly complicated one. But we're not going to go into a long answer because we're 4.5 minutes out from liftoff. But the basic answer is there can be a price difference. It sort of depends on what the mission SpaceX is bidding for is, and what the booster they're going to propose for that is. And the reason I sort of say that is because if NASA comes to SpaceX and says, here is this very sensitive satellite and we need all of this extra stuff, your launch contract cost is going to look a lot more heavy on the monetary side than a small, mission like XP, for example, the X-ray astronomy telescope that Falcon 9 launched in December, where that rocket was very, very small, and SpaceX did not charge the huge amount that they would for a geostationary mission for that particular one. It also went on a flight-proven booster. So the answer is basically yes, there can be price differences, but it does ultimately come down to what the customer need for a particular payload is, for what the overall launch cost would be.
Yeah, the bigger cost difference actually in regards to reusability is whether or not the mission can enable recovery of that booster back.
Right.
It's not as so much has the booster been recovered before, but does SpaceX get this booster back to fly again later? Because that's the real value is, are we losing a booster to support this mission? It happens very rarely these days, but that's the bigger difference.
Indeed. And at 3 minutes to go, so at this point in our countdown, fueling of the Falcon 9 is about to wrap up here in about 30 seconds. Fueling ends about 2.5 minutes prior to liftoff. We have already had the partial retraction of the strong back to the 88.5-degree position. And you can see Falcon 9 venting happily on the pad. Coming up here in about a minute, we'll have another big vent of Falcon 9, and that is our final one that says everything is good to go, proceeding down from a technical standpoint. So yeah, at 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go, Thomas, I think I will relieve you of commentary duty so we can get a track of this rocket as Falcon 9 B1051 heads northeast with 53 Starlink satellites tonight.
All right, stay tuned to Hagen and Chris for the live commentary of today's ascent. I'll join you on the other side, but wish me luck with the track. Should be a gorgeous view of the launch tonight.
It is indeed, and a brief moment of just a little bit of history. So this pad that Falcon 9 is on is Slick 40, and it was originally a Titan pad. Titans were these huge vehicles, massive solid rockets on either side of a hypergolic core stage. But when the Titan program ended, SpaceX took over Pad 40, and it is now the Falcon 9 pad. But a lot of history on this pad, as there is with basically any launch pad at the Cape, right, Hagen?
Yeah,
There we
definitely.
go. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted.
Consensus. Good. Yeah, so 90 seconds now to go. There is our final big vent that we would expect there from the transporter erector, indicating that things are good to go. And again, no precautions are needed just because SLS is on the nearby pad. I see a lot more of those questions rolling in. No special precautions because SLS is out. Falcon 9 far enough away from that as we head toward the 1 minute mark in our countdown. And again, this booster 1051 making its 12th flight, making it the fleet leader, which will head for an attempted landing on, just to read the instructions, 640 kilometers downrange from the landing site here. 45 seconds to go. At this point, Falcon 9 has control and is pressurizing its tanks for liftoff. And approaching that 30-second mark now, and we have crossed that as we continue to head toward liftoff. I'm seeing a few messages here in chat that we are getting chat messages via the Starlink constellation. So go internet rocket, go T-minus 10 seconds. Let's watch as Falcon 9 lifts off, and let's also listen as Falcon 9 lifts off here. And there she goes on the Starlink 4-12 mission. Look at that from Fleet Cam in Port Canaveral as Falcon 9 heads out. That onboard tracking shot from SpaceX, you can see the speed and the altitude there on the left-hand side of your screen as Falcon 9 ascends, now a minute into the flight, approaching the area of maximum dynamic pressure or peak stress on the vehicle. And what is so cool is looking out the window of my office here, I can see Falcon 9 ascending above the neighborhood here. This obviously this is a shot from the long-range tracking cameras, and now on board the Falcon 9 as well. Look at that altitude increase and that velocity increase as well. So far, so good for the Falcon 9 and the 53 Starlink satellites on board. All right, and coming up here momentarily, we will have the shutdown of the 9 Merlin first stage engines and the separation of the first and second stages. That shutdown of the first stage anticipated here around the 2.5 minute mark. But you can definitely see from the onboard cameras how those plumes from the engines are expanding as Falcon 9 is ascending into vacuum rather, already 57 kilometers in altitude. Standing by now for that stage separation. And you can see the engine shutdown there. There we go. And we will wait for Merlin ignition. And the Merlin vacuum engine is up and running. Look at that ablative cooling there on the right-hand side. Oh, and here comes payload fairing separation as well. Those pushers pushing those two halves of the payload fairings apart, and there are the 53 Starlink satellites. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you have the Falcon 9 Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, taking the satellites to orbit. And on the left, you have the onboard views from the Stage 1 booster, which is now just over 100 kilometers in altitude. So no matter how you shake it, it has reached space. And that booster is now headed for a planned landing on Just Read the Instructions, located about 640 kilometers northeast of the Kennedy Space Center off the coast of North Carolina. The payload fairings, which separated just shortly after, will continue onward to be recovered by the ship Doug, which is also out there to grab the payload fairings out of the water after splashdown. And if you look very carefully at those clouds underneath Falcon 9, you might see lightning flashes exactly there under that grid fin. The active thunderstorms that were off the coast of Florida that actually prevented the liftoff at the original 11:23 p.m. Eastern launch time moved off our coast, and you can see the booster cruising over them now as it heads towards its landing.
Folks, from here at the press site for today's launch, wow. That was a thunderous liftoff if I've ever heard one. A very loud liftoff with this low cloud deck. It was beautiful. You also saw the visuals. Lost it in the clouds pretty shortly because there was some thicker clouds once it got high enough. But was still a very cool liftoff.
And I hear it now up in Daytona. I can hear the rumble now.
Very nice.
Yes.
It's these early morning launches where everything's quiet down that if you're far enough away, you can sometimes still hear it. I've heard it in Daytona like once.
It can be hard sometimes, yes. But you can see the booster now at 113 kilometers in altitude, now 112, its speed increasing. So it has reached its suborbital apogee and is now falling back down into the atmosphere, while stage 2 is approaching 12,000 kilometers per hour in velocity at 157 kilometers in altitude. That second stage Merlin vac engine firing strong and true there, taking those satellites to orbit. And Thomas, I know sometimes if the weather is right, you can also see the entry burn of the Falcon 9, which is coming up here momentarily, but maybe not today because of the weather?
Yeah, I'm not going to be holding out hope today. I believe there's some problematic clouds in my way today, but that's all right. We'll catch the next one.
Gotcha. Well, we are about 30 seconds away from the start of that entry burn of the Falcon 9 here per the pre-launch timeline. But of course, it goes by velocity and altitude. So we will wait for the reignition of those 3 Merlin engines on the first stage. Here coming up in about 10 seconds, and again, everything continuing to look good with the second stage, which is the primary point of the mission, taking those Starlink satellites to orbit, even though booster landings are cool. They are. But here we go with the anticipated entry burn any moment now. And there you go, fighting fire with fire. That entry burn is underway, and you can see the velocity dropping rapidly as the altitude continues to drop as well. And that velocity will now continue to decrease even after the entry burn ends because of atmospheric drag and friction on the booster. So you can see that entry burn now complete, and we will now await, the entry burn now complete, and we will rate the landing burn, which is expected at around the 8-minute 7-second mark here into the flight. But everything continuing to look good, Thomas, as Falcon 9 keeps taking those satellites to orbit.
Yep, can report no entry burn visible from here, but that was expected. But looking forward to a potential 12th recovery again. This is a milestone for today's flight, the first time a booster is attempting to land for the 12th time.
Indeed it is, and it is not uncommon for us to lose telemetry from stage 1 before it's reacquired by the drone ship as it sort of goes over the horizon from the tracking stations at Cape Canaveral. So if SpaceX does lose that, it's not a cause for concern if we lose those feeds. But you can see here we are expecting a landing of the first stage about 8.5 minutes into flight, followed about 17 seconds later by the Stage 2's SECO 1, stage engine cutoff 1 to enter its preliminary orbit. So here we go with the anticipated landing burn of Stage 1. You can see it's very close to the surface of the Atlantic Ocean here now at 1.5 kilometers. So, and here we go. Footage from the booster and the drone ship, Thomas. Look at that. Oh, look at the drone ship just emerge from the darkness. Look at that.
Some very clean views. Check that out.
Oh, these are very clean views. Very clean views. All right, and we will wait for that confirmation for landing and the view of the booster on just read the instructions there. But here is Stage 2 about to, and there is the booster on the drone ship. So booster 1051-13. And that's a nice ring to it, doesn't it, Thomas?
It is. I like these long serial numbers. Oh, I just realized I referenced something else as a joke that people are going to meme me for. But yeah, that was very cool. And happy to see a booster that will be coming back to Port Canaveral in a few days with 12 flights under its belt. And like you said, ready for a 13th.
Indeed, and just a little bit more. This is what Das is not here, but this is his favorite view on launch day: an empty launch pad, a happy empty launch pad, meaning that everything has worked and the rocket has done its job. In fact, we did see Stage 2's first engine cutoff, stage engine cutoff 1 or SECO 1, there right on time, which would have placed the satellites into roughly a 304 by 17 kilometer orbit. We are now going to be in a prolonged coast phase until 45.5 minutes after liftoff, at which point the second stage will reignite its engine for a brief 1-second pulse, which will finalize the overall orbital shape and trajectory. And then that will lead to Starlink satellite separation 1 hour and 2 minutes after liftoff. We are not going to stay live for that entire time, but but I do want to hit a couple of other things. Musical Wolves saying the broomstick has landed. I very much appreciate it. To everyone who supported us with super chats as well, thank you very much. Including this one, where I apparently was featured in a dream about earning the trust of raiders, and so apparently I have won the trust of raiders in a village in someone's dream, which is very nice. I do appreciate that. But thank you so much to everyone, to everyone who supported us today. Thank you very much. We're never able to get to every single question because everyone has such amazing questions, and we really do thank you for all of that. So thank you very much from our end. Hagen, I know you had stepped outside there to see it. Were you able to see the entry burn from your perspective?
I believe I saw a brief orange brightening of the clouds, but that could have just been my eyes messing with me. But yeah,
Gotcha. Well, well, I am seeing that Thomas is getting the signal that he needs to pack up there in the background. So Hagen, thank you so much for joining us on our stream here tonight for the launch of the Starlink 4-12 mission here from Cape Canaveral.
of course, I had a lot of fun talking with you guys.
Indeed, one of these days we will have to get you down here. Gonna have to get you down here as well. And also out there, Thomas, thank you. I think I still heard you on comms. Thank you so much for the good track as it was under the clouds, and for rolling out for this delay in this early morning liftoff.
Yeah, happy to. It was a wonderful liftoff to watch. Happy to be on comms, and everyone stay tuned for future coverage. Next launch from the Space Coast should be that Axiom 1 mission at the beginning of next month, but I suspect you'll hear my voice before then with some other spaceflight news events in and around the world. So talk to you all next time, but signing off from here at the press site.
Indeed, and also out in the field was Stephen Marr taking some photographs of Falcon 9, or rather attempting to. We'll see what he got with the weather and the clouds there. But thanks to Stephen, who was not on comms, but was out there for us today as well. And also, this webcast would not have been possible without the work of Michael Baylor, who's pushing all the buttons, pulling all the levers in the background. Michael, a sincere thank you for all of the hard work that you do to make all of our streams possible. But with that, and with the Starlink 4-12 mission in its preliminary parking orbit, that is going to do it for our NSF broadcast of this launch. It's been a busy week for us, and thank you all for joining us for everything that has happened, including this Starlink mission in the middle of the night, for us at least, or for wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight down, lead off.
Bring in, let's see, lead off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.